Hello, Jeremiah Cox here, one of the producers of Daily Progress by iiNCHES Foundation. We welcome executive life coach and mental health advocate Malia Brown to our podcast, with a special thank you to our friends at Kindly MD for sponsoring this episode. Check it out. Let's make some progress today.
Welcome to the iiNCHES Foundation podcast. This is episode number 2, which seems kind of crazy that we're just at the beginning, but we are at the beginning. And today I'll be joined once again by Tim Pickett from Kindly MD, CEO and founder. They are the sponsors of the iiNCHES Foundation podcast. And we are pleased to have as a guest Malia Brown, who, as you will find out, is a very accomplished life coach. And she will tell some stories in this podcast that I think you'll find extremely interesting, including some important life hacks that can make you healthier. Having a discussion, mental health issues as well. And we were talking off mic before we got started, and you can chime in on this, Malia. Flu season. Like, I know when football season is. I know when basketball season is. Flu season, like, is it like regimented? This is when flu season starts. This is the first time that you'll get the flu, or how do we even gauge that?
Because you get your flu vaccine in the fall, right? But you can get it as early as July or August sometimes. We order our flu vaccines in January, February for the fall. And there is no real defined flu season other than when it just starts happening.
Yeah.
In Utah, it's a little late this year.
Yeah,
right?
I heard that it normally is in October, and it started maybe later in November, even into December.
Yeah, I think the storms, the weather, when people get indoors more and they start to, share.
Yeah.
This year it wasn't so much the flu in the fall as there was a big outbreak of norovirus in the community.
Yeah.
Norovirus is a GI virus. It's extremely contagious. It's like 1 to 3 days. People call it the stomach flu.
Yeah.
But it's violently vomiting and sometimes diarrhea, but usually what they call self-limiting.
Yeah.
Which, to be honest, the flu mostly is self-limiting. Most people, whether they do or don't get a flu vaccine, you get the flu. The flu is a respiratory virus, right?
And short you're going to get influenza.
Yep, influenza. You're going to get a lot of body aches and the respiratory disease and the fever that goes with it. But not so much. Flu is not a GI bug.
Okay.
And so there's a little bit of a I think, in the community, we think of the flu as like whatever you get, but flu is a little more specific. Now, another question that I think a lot of people have, especially now, is should I get the flu vaccine?
Yes. That is, everybody's asking questions about vaccines now.
So if you work in the hospital system, you are required to get a vaccine. And if you don't get a vaccine, then you have to wear a mask from like October to, they push it out till like May now, and you've got to wear a mask. But remember, in COVID, we were all wearing masks. And flu vaccination actually went down because people were like, I, for one, I was wearing a mask all the time. So I thought, if I'm wearing a mask all the time and washing my hands, am I more likely or less likely to get the flu? Probably less likely. Yeah. I didn't get the flu vaccine.
Didn't need to.
I felt like I kind of didn't need to. I was doing I was staying away from everybody anyway.
Yeah.
So I have mixed feelings about the vaccines. I think they're good, right? Like, I was trained in medicine.
Yeah.
I think vaccines are good in general to keep populations safe.
Yeah.
I'm a vaccine fan. Talk to your provider.
Yeah.
Right.
Which I think is something that we will always emphasize, is talk to your own personal medical provider. You brought up masks, and I saw something that mask mandates are coming back for the quademic, right? They've got all these names for, right? They call it the quademic. It's like, oh, that sounds scary. The mask, it feels like we went through kind of this phase of, masks don't work. This is according to Fauci. Masks don't work. Now you got to wear 2 masks. Masks don't work. So where are we with masks at this point as it relates to my own personal health? And
That's a great question.
what I understand is the mask is protecting the other people. Like even when you're wearing it in the hospital, it's not it's not protecting you necessarily, it's protecting the person that you might be working on. Is that accurate?
Yeah. In surgery in Europe, they didn't wear masks when the U.S. was wearing masks. This is just in general, in the operating rooms, we wear masks so we don't spit on the sterile field. It's like, that's it. So when you sneeze, everything goes sideways.
Yeah.
When you're wearing a mask can masks be helpful? I think so.
Yeah.
They're going to protect, like on an airplane, if you're immune compromised, you might pick something up, you might give something to somebody else. I think there's a reason to wear a mask where you're in close quarters. Do I think like in elementary school we should be making these kids wear a mask? Hell no, because they're touching the mask, they're touching their face, they're just touching everything.
Yeah.
Like that's worse than not wearing a mask at all. Just teach them how to wash their hands when they come in, when they go out, like things like that. I don't know. Masks are really controversial.
I have an 11 and a 12-year-old. So when going through COVID and they're being homeschooled, and this is, I think, something, Malia, that maybe you can address. There was so much being, published about how because you're wearing a mask and you can't see people's facial expressions, like how did that affect our communication and even developmentally for this younger generation that went through both the isolation of being homeschooled, but also when you're out in public? I still remember it's like, I gotta, we're going into the store. It's like, grab the masks out of the back of the car and you throw on this mask. But we had, a year or so, maybe more than that, where we weren't really communicating with people. And how has that affected, especially this younger generation coming up?
Well, I can tell you, I've been working with children for the last 25 years.
Yeah.
And every age level, and most of what I do is trying to help teenagers move from, their age in high school and transition with kind of agency, becoming an adult in college. And what I know, and I can tell you for, all of my experience for the last 5 years, is that kids are very much more sensitive today than they ever were. And I think it's part because we don't have they didn't have micro expression to rely on. And micro expression is one of the main ways that humans communicate, right? We can see the micro expression in our face. We can tell if their Adam's apple maybe gulps when they try and tell us something. And we're thinking, that doesn't really feel like maybe a truth, or maybe there's something behind that they're not telling me. They need to tell me, but they just can't express, and kids are obviously pretty transparent for most part. In adults, we learn to mask.
Fewer filters for
we have masks ourselves
Right.
beyond the mask that we were trying to wear for COVID. So we kind of keep having to let down these masks and keep expanding our ways of being better communicators with kids. And I think 11 and 12-year-olds particularly got it, by the way. You probably have very sensitive children.
Yes.
And
And I think that, even going back to this understanding of, do the masks work? Do they not work? My question would be, from the vaccine standpoint, how important was the natural immunity? Like, I got the flu, so now I'm more protected against it. I remember growing up, and you have the chicken pox parties. Like, somebody in the neighborhood got chicken pox. It's like, all right, everybody go over there because everybody wants to get chicken pox so you can get over it.
Yeah, I had my kindergarten. I specifically remember my 5-year-old birthday was I had chicken pox, and all my family was invited so they could all get it.
Yeah.
Right? Remember that?
Yes.
I'm glad you brought that up. That's like a core memory that I just realized. Yeah. And now that's totally gone, right?
Yeah.
Because we vaccinate against it. Yeah.
But that I guess the immunity that you get versus the vaccine, which is giving you immunity too, right?
Sure, yeah.
Maybe if you can explain,
is it different? Is it better?
Is it better?
It's not that different.
Yeah.
The immunity is not that different. And this isn't necessarily my wheelhouse. So I think that would you rather get COVID? I think it just comes down to would you rather get COVID or would you rather get the illness and then be, and have to suffer through it? Or would you rather just be vaccinated and have an inflammatory response and then be done? I think most people are just going to choose, okay, we don't want the risks associated with the disease.
Right.
So we're better off just vaccinating them. I think that, to me, that's what it comes down to. Do you want all these kids having chickenpox anymore? Because a certain percentage of them are going to have complications related to the chickenpox. Or should we just vaccinate them all? We have a smaller percentage of kids who have a problem with the vaccine than they would with the disease.
Yeah.
And so from a population standpoint, it just makes more sense. From an individual standpoint, it doesn't make maybe any sense.
Yeah.
And that's where we talk about, whether you get the flu vaccine now or the COVID vaccine, or you want all the vaccines for your kids. So we're talking to parents and saying, we're trying to convince parents again, no, vaccines work.
Yeah.
We like vaccines. It's why we don't have polio.
Right.
We get that there are a small subset of people who don't need it, don't want it. That's okay as long as the rest of the population gets them.
So this is kind of the category that I'm in right now. I'll turn 59 this year, 2025. I have, including my mother, several people that I know that have had episodes with shingles, and like really bad episodes with shingles. And I'm not the guy that goes out and gets every vaccine every year, every season. I don't do that. But I went and got the shingles vaccine, even though I've had chickenpox. And I don't know if that's, even though I have, whether or not that makes a difference, because I'm really concerned that I don't want to get shingles.
Mm-hmm. And if you do get shingles, you don't want it to be as bad as you've seen.
Right.
Yeah.
So is that...
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
And that's what you should do.
Yeah.
So from a mental health, bringing this back around to a mental health, we need to be talking to our patients about the whole picture.
Yeah.
Not just the vaccine, but how it relates to your ability to cope with your own life and your own risk. You're 59. Is the vaccine a good idea? For you, yes.
Yeah.
Because of all the things you've just said. The fear of getting it, the fear of getting it really bad, your experience with other people. That plays a part into your decision to get the vaccine. So it shouldn't just be everybody just get it.
Yeah.
It shouldn't just be everybody just gets to wear a mask. It should be, well, why? What do we want out of this?
Yeah.
Right?
Which is, this is, to bring Kindly MD into this, this is why I love this program, is because when I'm with Kindly MD, I'm meeting with a physician, but I also have somebody like you, Malia, that is looking out for my mental health and more from, a life coach standpoint. And it's like, okay, what are some of the factors here that play into it, and observing that and helping me make an informed decision on what I should do, but also kind of checking me. It's like, okay, are you dealing with some fear that is maybe unrealistic? And from your standpoint, as you're working with clients, how do you gauge that? How do you come to an understanding? Is it just through the communication with them, or are there certain things that might tip you off from your years of experience? Like, okay, might be what we're dealing with, as opposed to really needing some sort of medical treatment.
I know from my own experience, but also working with a lot of people, that people are an individualized N of one. And this is the most important thing happening in medicine right now, I think, is this individualized sense that each one of us have our own issues going on internally in our minds and bodies, which is also changing the chemistry in our bodies, right? We know that epigenetics is a matter of actually your environment plus your genetic coding.
Yeah.
And your environment is actually what's happening from your brain
Yeah.
in a chemical concoction into your body.
Yeah.
I spend a lot of time with a scientific community out of UC San Diego, and they're doing massive studies on how meditation and can literally transform what's happening in your body at the cellular level.
Yeah.
And so they're actually seeing different kinds of proteins that are being created from meditation, for example, right? So is it easy enough for you, Alema, to decide for yourself through your intuitive nature, for one, which we all have. Every person has intuitive nature. And we can cultivate and grow that intuitive nature more. That's one thing that we can do. But the other thing that we can do is say, what is it that you're feeling? And if you're feeling fear, what we know is that fear triggers cortisol.
Yeah.
It triggers a litany of adrenaline in the system. That adrenaline, we know there's good stress, and then there's going beyond good stress to creating bad stress, and bad stress takes down your immune system. These are known factors in the medical and scientific community, and there are ways to mitigate easily, right? With breath work, there's ways to mitigate with being in a loving environment, oxytocin between two human beings, right? The lovingness that can get cultivated when you're in community. So we can use those natural ways to boost our immune system.
Yeah.
And we can use those natural ways to tap into, well, what is right for Alema? What is right for Tim? What is right for Malia? What is right for that N of one that's you? And it's much different than using the mean
Yeah,
to
it
serve
is
everyone.
much. Yep.
And this feels like the breakthrough, right?
Yeah.
With Kindly MD is that we're bringing in that component as part of the holistic approach.
Exactly. You have somebody who's telling you the mean and telling you the data and giving you those options.
Yep.
And then you have somebody on the mental health side, the coach side, really, who is helping you understand how that affects you and why sometimes that's good, sometimes it's bad, and empowering the patient to make a good decision or a decision. And then, of course, there's two sides of what happens next. You empower the patient for whatever that process of empowering the patient to make their own decision makes better decisions later.
Yeah.
Right? That builds momentum.
And we know it overcomes the placebo effect. We know it overcomes the nocebo effect. Like, scientifically, we know these things. So this is not a matter of, are we wondering if the data is real?
Yeah.
Right? If a person becomes empowered, they can literally transform from a death prognosis, for example, to living out, beyond cancer, for example. Stage 4 cancers, often you get under 6 months to live, right? But these people can go on for 10 or 20 or more years when they have committed to themselves in a decision, this is what I'm going to do. And I understand the mean. We're not trying to make people ignorant. We're
No,
trying to
and it doesn't
increase their-
always work.
Yeah, of course.
Right? Like, it doesn't always cure the patient. It doesn't always, but it always empowers the patient.
Always.
So the outcome, regardless of whether you died in 3 months from the cancer or whether you lived another 10 years, was yours to make, and it empowered you. And so you had a success over that course of the lifespan. I think that's what's most important in the collaboration and that whole person wellness that we're now getting to. On our side, one of the reasons why providers, physicians, PAs, nurse practitioners have been a little resistant to this has been liability and allowing a patient to make a decision that is outside the mean. We write down in our chart, we told the patient they were going to die if they didn't do this, and we write it down.
Yeah.
And I'm going to still write that down, okay? Because that's our liability.
Yeah.
Right?
To protect your
and this is
liability.
why this is our training. And then I'm going to pass it off to a behavioral health person who then can chart the reasons why we're collaborating and the patient's making decisions. And so I don't want to spend a lot of time necessarily on how we kind of justify this treatment program to the system, the greater system.
Yeah.
But I do think it's important for people to understand that part of the reason why we've been resistant to it is liability. And now this model allows us to push the liability aside and really do what's right for the patient. We're just finding a new way to do it.
I want to just ask get your thoughts on this, the term or the word empowerment, and how it impacts or affects the brain, the chemicals that are released. And you bring up oxytocin, which is, that great chemical that, and I don't know if this is true or not, I heard this one time that the greatest release of oxytocin in a human's life would be a female's life, would be when they give birth and that connection with their child, the oxytocin just like gushes. Is that true? And what effect does oxytocin have on us?
Great question. So there's a lot happening, right, in the mother-child bond.
Yeah.
Obviously, that's one. But I want to take it one step further for you, just to make sure that everybody can identify with it. It's about altruism. So humans and community is wired for altruism. So imagine if you're just going to, if you're giving birth to a child, you just want that child to be 120% happier. But you can do this in your life too. You have 2 young children. You just want them to be 120% happier. That's all you want today.
Yeah.
Right? You just want a little bit more happiness for them. And if you dial into that altruism, you can trigger the same oxytocin in the body. You can trigger the serotonin in the gut, which is where we know we're making a primary decisions is coming from the gut. And that's where serotonin, 90% of serotonin is made is in the gut. We used to think it was made, for you to be able to sleep, but if you don't have good gut biome, for example, you don't have good serotonin. So you can't sleep. That's one thing. Or maybe you drink alcohol, or maybe you imbibe in too much sugar, or maybe you eat a lot of fatty foods and you're destroying the serotonin in the gut, then you can't sleep. My point to you is that the brain chemistry is related throughout your body, whether it's coming from your brain or it's a reverse signal coming from either your gut or your heart, because there's also neurons in the heart. So neurons in the heart can actually trigger neurons in the brain to do certain things, create certain ways. I'm telling you this, why? Because my specialty is about the brain. Why? Because I was diagnosed with needing brain surgery. So that became very important for me at one point, was to understand what is my brain-body connection. And so I've spent the last 20 years involved in that depth of experience. And most of us, if we just trigger this altruism button, can change everything in our body chemistry. I mean, think about it. When people say, are you depressed? Go out and help someone. Get into a soup kitchen. Go out and help your neighbor, maybe mow their lawn or walk their dog, or just go over and have a friendly conversation. You actually change your entire inner pharmacy by doing that. And when you do that, you enhance immunity. You enhance the way you feel. You enhance the way that you operate with other people. You're coming from what we call a right dominant hemisphere instead of a left dominant hemisphere in the brain. And that right dominant hemisphere is actually oneness and creation. And what I mean by that is we start to feel like we're more of a collective community rather than being really self-centered and egoic.
So is that the hack?
It's the hack.
Doing something for somebody else or thinking about it.
Yep.
Could you do something like write a thank you letter?
I prescribe that, in fact, in my mental health awareness.
Really?
5 thank you letters a week.
Wow.
Yep. The same way you could do 5 gratitudes a day. It's the only thing that we call, that's the ongoing annuity, is 5 gratitudes, right? So I'm super grateful to be here with both of you today. This is a wonderful opportunity to be sitting together and having this deep conversation that people are thinking about, but nobody else is talking about it.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
And once in a while you might get a glimpse of it from a movie, or you might hear somebody on a podcast say something, that's great. These people are coming together in community and they feel better, and they're noticing things like, I'm myself, I need to have my own prescription of medicine.
Yeah.
I can't just be given anything. It might not work for me, right? And they know that. If they know that already, they're already on to a different trajectory, right? So this conversation is very important, because empowerment, bringing us to that place where we have agency over our own body, super critical. I waited for 5 years to get brain surgery.
Yeah. Was it a tumor, if you don't mind me asking?
Yeah, so
my wife had a brain tumor, had it removed, and fortunately I caught it early.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Wow. And how many years ago was that?
That was over, I think, 12 years now.
Yeah. What a blessing to have gone through, because the brain has transformed, and surgical remedies have transformed so much in the last 20 years for the brain, right? I had what they called a broken blood vessel. They really didn't know what to call it. It was that unidentifiable thing. Yeah. But the neurosurgeon came to me, and he told me in no uncertain terms, you will die. And I said, all right, I heard you. Thank you very much. I got exactly what you said. And I said, I'm going to go get some other opinions. I think a lot of people do this, right? And he said, no, Malia, I think you don't understand what I'm saying. And he came again, and he said, every day for the rest of your life will be like playing Russian roulette. You will open the chamber to the revolver, you will put a bullet in there, you'll spin it, and then you will pull the trigger every day that you don't get surgery. I said, well, thank you for that super profound imagery.
Yeah.
And now I really get what it means to you.
I've been in the room when surgeons have had these conversations with patients.
Yeah.
Yes. Yep.
And it was actually, that empowered me, because I already understood for myself that it was okay for me to make my own choice. But, if you have an MD in a white coat standing in front of you, and they have years of training. I mean,
Oh,
this
yeah.
man, he went through so much to be my neurosurgeon sitting there, and I really was respectful of that.
Yeah.
That he'd been 20 years to get to that point where he could say, in all honesty, this is where we think you're going, and tomorrow you could die. You have a 1 in 5 chance, 1 in 4 chance, right? And I said, okay, got it. And I still went on my own path. And I said, look, I need to get control mind over body, because I believe that what we've created in our body is coming from within us.
Yeah.
Nobody hit me. I didn't get in a car accident. They couldn't equate it to something outside of me. We actually found it, I call it by a happy chance. So, we do a lot of diagnostic testing, and sometimes we just do it for diagnosis.
Yep.
Sometimes we do it for life screening, as that's called, right? But if you find something in your head and somebody goes, well, you didn't have this before, but you have it today, you have to deal with it. You don't have the choice of unknowing that you have something that could kill you, right? So I got lucky, and I got to transform my whole world around understanding the brain chemistry. I literally tried to reverse it. Laughter, that's another
Great
amazing.
medicine.
Another hack, yes.
Yes. Laughter is incredible. And I met people in that 5 years who literally had laughed away tumors.
Wow.
They had laughed away thyroid issues. They had laughed away brainstem problems that were causing them physical maladies where they couldn't walk. Because I went seeking alternative remedies, alternative, so to speak. I don't think laughter is very alternative. We all need it, right? It's a common conversation.
Thank you, notes and laughter.
Yeah.
Doesn't fall into like our cannabis world,
Right.
but okay, yeah.
Here's one of the, because as we're talking about this, and I think of my background in addiction and addiction recovery, and the 12-step program is very altruistic, right? And so much of it, as people look at the program, it's like, and you're not even really dealing with the alcoholism or the addiction, you're dealing with this other part. And as you deal with that other part, then it basically fixes the need for alcoholism or the drive and for the pills or whatever we're addicted to. And in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, almost every chapter that's talking about the solution and talking about fear or anxiety or resentment, it includes asking for divine intervention. So, God help me, right? I realize that the power is within me through you, but it's always steering it back to go help somebody else. And it's like, that's the answer to fixing my problem, is to not worry about it and help somebody else. And what you're sharing is that is absolutely the case, is that by doing that, then I'm releasing these chemicals that have a healing component, I would assume.
That's exactly right. And Jill Bolte Taylor, she is a Harvard researcher. She was a stroke researcher. And then she had a stroke in her late 30s. You can watch a bunch of her TED Talks online. And she talks about whole brain living. And it's very important because she was studying stroke. Then she had this stroke. She was witnessing from we all have this observer standpoint where I'm sitting here with you, but I'm also noticing that there are other people in the room. I'm noticing that there are things happening outside of the room. I can hear that, right? So that's that observer person that we all have. And so she noticed as an observer during this stroke that, how it was happening for her, just like it happened for all of the stroke patients that they talked about. Well, what she didn't know is when she got through the stroke that it was going to take her 8 years to come back.
Yeah.
It was going to take her 8 years to make the brain connection between hemispheres. And luckily her mom brought her back just like when she was a kid and retrained her and retaught her all the things that she needed to know. And then her hemispheres reconnected and she came back online. She's written beautiful books about this and is really quite an incredible person. But the whole point is that for years we've thought the left and the right hemispheres operated independently. All right, and right behind those are amygdalae. And the amygdalae are the chemical transference into the body. So if you take in a stimulus through the left hemisphere, and most of us are right dominant, not everybody, but left hemisphere is the way that we kind of relate to this in the brain world. If you're right-handed, you're taking it in through the left hemisphere, it has to be logical, it has to be methodical, and you have to feel safe. If it triggers the backside of the brain, they call this the reptilian part of the brain,
Yeah.
and says, I'm not safe,
Yeah.
it stays in the left hemisphere, but never gets to the front part of the brain, which is the
Yeah.
prefrontal cortex, right?
Where you can make sense of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you can have better decision making,
Yep.
Yeah.
right? And you can ask for help, and you can go out and help someone else. So if you're hanging out in this fear center or the center where we get addiction
Yeah.
going, right? Then you're always going to be looking for yourself, because you're afraid you're going to die.
Yeah.
You don't have this thing. You're
Yeah.
afraid
Yeah.
you're going to die.
And we are operating from the amygdala, or the amygdala is the way you
That's
pronounce it,
true.
right?
Yep.
And
Yep.
and it is so much, it's triggered by this fear,
Yep.
and then the selfishness comes out because I'm in survival mode.
Yeah.
And we don't typically make good decisions operating from that part of our brain, right? We make the proper good decisions, and the thing that differentiates us as humans is what happens in the prefrontal cortex, right?
Exactly.
So I think that all of those things, which have been to some degree neglected, maybe in the medical practice, or at least not combined. You're talking about the right and the left hemispheres not being, operating together. And again, in medicine, now bringing in the mental health side of it, it feels like, okay, this is how it's supposed to be.
Yeah, you have all of these options now for patients and people to get the help they need and to start using the frontal lobe again. And that is these little things we've talked about, the hacks, the thank you notes, the do something for somebody else, the go talk about it with somebody, And there's 100 different options.
The 8-second hug.
Yeah.
If
The
you don't know, an
8-second hug.
8-second
Yeah.
hug creates more oxytocin.
And so
kids
you're
love
just
this.
trying to put this together to empower the person, which in brain chemistry probably translates to use the frontal lobe more, right, to make these decisions. And bam, we've pivoted just a little bit, building the skills that we need to do this again and again, to build the momentum, to have always better health. And I think through this discussion, it's been fascinating because you're just using these little things that we're always using. You're like, well, my frontal lobe's turned off. Well, I'm going to write this down because I can't write it down without using the frontal lobe. And that just hacks my brain to do this. And the AA, that always made sense. But now if you're somebody who really wants to understand the brain chemistry, you can say, oh, well, that's why.
Yeah.
That's why it makes sense.
And I'm going to activate my prefrontal lobe by praying,
Of course.
divine
Yes.
connection or
Just-
connection with another individual.
Even holding your hands together in the prayer position, we know, for some people, I don't want to pray. Well, just nobody has a problem putting two palms together. That activates right and left hemisphere at the same time. And the reason we want to get into that right hemisphere is because that is the connection around us, right? So it's not just the prefrontal cortex. We want to be clear about that. It's actually activating both hemispheres of the brain for more coherency across the brain. And the right amygdala, the right, is the one that's triggering the happy chemicals. The cortisol, the cortisol is coming from left.
Yeah.
Oxytocin, serotonin is coming from right. We know that.
Yeah.
Right? So if you just want to activate these things on your own, you can do it many ways. You can actually touch your fingertips together, and it's very calming and very soothing. This is called a PQ rep. Shirzad Shamin from Positive Intelligence out of Stanford is activating this. I mean, there are so many
I do
things.
this when I get really anxious.
That's good. You already have it as a natural.
Well, because the six senses, right? Like you're trying to smell, and I'm trying to bring myself back to right here, right now, and I'm trying to touch something so that I can, I don't know, I want to block the spiral.
Yeah.
So I want to do something with my six senses. What do you see? What do you smell?
You're bringing yourself back into the body.
Yeah. So
Yep.
can I shift gears here?
Yeah.
Because you are interested and you're involved in movement, and you've got a bar. And it seems like this might be a good time to shift to how does movement and exercise fit
Activate
into
that,
activate this too, because we've been talking a lot about the mental health and the mental aspect of this, but doesn't physical activity also do this?
Yeah, so somatic methodology, that we've been talking about this in the psychology world for a long time. Somatic is the body, right? is incredible for changing the state of the brain. So like I said before, you can either come from the brain or you can come from the body, come from your stomach. What you eat makes you feel different, right? Opening your heart and love for someone makes you feel different. So the F3 bar was designed by Jason Teague. He is an individual like all of us who went to the doctor, got a diagnosis. The diagnosis was, I'm sorry, your super active lifestyle since you were a young man didn't work out, right? You've now hurt yourself to the point you're going to need to fuse 3 parts of your back and your spine. And he went, oh, geez, you mean I'm not going to get to play golf anymore? I'm not going to get to ski anymore? I'm not going to get to go hiking anymore? No. Just no. So he started.
I refused that diagnosis.
Kind of. And it's okay. We get the feedback, and then we say, well, I don't want that as my future, and we choose a new future. So he said, all right, what can I do differently? And he invented the F3 bar, which is the bar it's a straight bar that has a bend over the shoulder area and a straight bar out to the side, so that both of your arms can actually go on top of this bar.
And you can open up this part of your body.
First thing that happens is a chest opening.
Yeah.
If you think about that, we're all hunched over, our posture's down, looking at our phones. You open up your chest. First thing that happens when you open up your chest is actually it sends a signal to the brain, I'm safe. Because we collapse down.
When we don't feel safe.
When we don't feel safe, or when we're trying to crawl into a small space. Like that's how we're doing our phones, trying to crawl in this small 16, space of our phone, right? Or TV does the same thing. Now we open up, and it goes, oh, I'm safe. And triggers the brain to go, oh, you're safe. What can we do now? Now, here's what's amazing, too, is that the spinal cord releases all these endorphins. So you put your arms out on this F3 bar, and you start turning side to side. There's only 4 main movements with the F3 bar that will almost transform your life overnight. They take less than 5 minutes to do these 4 moves. And now your spinal cord has endorphins running down it again. Now, all that time that you've collapsed your vertebrae, you've opened up the passageway again for that spinal cord to flow, for the endorphins to flow. Your brain and your body's getting connected again. And it really, between the heart and the endorphins and the spinal cord, you're now in a completely brand new state. It is a revolutionized tool, and it doesn't take much.
And it's so simple.
Yes.
Which is the beauty of it. It has brought to mind several parts of our conversation, brought to mind for me as I've gone on this recovery journey myself, right? One of the things that has become clear is that there are no accidents or mistakes in our lives, right? They're all purposeful. And one of the things that came to me was that there's a difference between a design flaw, which is a mistake, and ends up at TJ Maxx or wherever, on a discount. And there's design flaws versus a designed flaw, like something, whether it's your brain or that diagnosis that the inventor of the F3 bar had. For me, my addiction, that's a design flaw, like it had purpose. Without that, without your brain situation, would you be where you are today? Very unlikely, maybe impossible. But because of that, because of these design flaws that we have, it forces us, or at least encourages us, to take a look at a different path. And in that regard, people say this sometimes. They'll go to an AA meeting and hear somebody say, I'm a grateful recovering alcoholic. It's like, why would you be grateful for that? It's like, it has changed my life. Because of that ailment, that designed flaw, it has encouraged me to seek this divine connection that I otherwise would not have had, certainly not to that level. And we all have those experiences in our lives. And again, going back to, how do I perceive that? It's like I could be, throw a pity party for myself. Woe is me, my life sucks, or I can see like, oh, this challenge may be the gateway to something fantastic. And I'm actually gonna assume that it is the gateway to something fantastic.
Well, and sometimes we can't even get there right away. Sometimes we're just so angry it happened to us.
Well,
that it just gives us enough
stages of grief, right? Right?
Enough of a propulsion to get us to the next stage, which is I'm going to do something about it.
Yeah,
right.
And we're not saying that your you wouldn't go back and change things if you could.
Yeah.
We're just saying you're glad you can't go back.
Yeah.
And you're going to go forward
Yeah.
regardless.
Yep.
And that's in Jason's
In
case.
gratitude.
Well, we can even make that transition. We can go, I'm going to go forward regardless. And once we start getting the new experience of, wow, look at me empowered and what I'm actually changing in myself. In his case, he didn't have to have the surgery. He still golfs 5 days a week and he has a 5 handicap.
Good for him.
All right, right? And he's in his
go.
50s. All right? So something happened there.
Yeah.
But he's transformed many lives since
Sure.
then
Yeah.
with this bar. And so there's an opportunity for each of us to go, oh, well, I could try what he's doing and see if it also works for me. And I don't have a big time investment and I don't have a big money investment. I'm not looking for some drug that, is going to cost me $1,000 a month and maybe I'll have to go on for life because they told me that's the only way.
Yeah.
Right? Instead, we're going to say, well, why don't we empower you and see what you can do? And that could spark you to have another amazing discovery for yourself or help another individual. And it creates a perpetuating cycle in this altruistic brain that's creating you to feel better, and then your environment feels better, and then the people around you feel better, and your community starts transforming. And this is what is so amazing about what's possible inside of that brain space, right? It's not just you that you're influencing.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a kindly MD conversation all the way.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
For
us,
Yeah, I'm sorry.
right, like
think of the physician and where you're coming from.
Yeah,
and you
I've been
are
trying to think about
expanding
this
now.
Yeah, you're talking about an F3 bar, and you're talking about different things you can do and different hacks, and so to me it is, and what I try to, I guess, empower, or you're just trying to listen to the patient to it's just that little step. So for us, or for me, it doesn't matter what you choose.
Right.
Like, it could be that bar. That could be the thing that makes the difference, and you are sold. It could be AA. It could be the shingles vaccine. Honestly, I hate to say it like this, but I don't really care. I don't really care what it is, as long as it is a thing that makes you adjust your brain chemistry and then move from here to the next step. And then I'm going to see you again, and we're just going to do it again. And if that thing you chose didn't work, we're going to find something else. And we're just going to keep coming back to this and back to this until you're ready, or there's something that is intriguing to you. It could be anything.
And you chose medicine because it's altruistic, and nature like that. You don't stop because the person hit a roadblock. You take them to the next place because you want them to have that 20% happier, right?
Yeah, you're always trying to get a little bit better.
Yeah.
Right? Your journey is this same thing, right? You're working today on something that is just going to go 10 or 20% more, whereas 10 years ago you were just trying to get 10 or 20% more, and it was a completely different space.
Right.
You can't get this across to an 11 or 12 or a 19 or 20-year-old as easy.
You would be surprised.
You can?
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, that's a skill set.
They are so malleable that they want to feel better, right? I have some students that, for example, are fighting with their siblings, and they're fighting with their siblings. They've been fighting with their siblings for the last 2.5 years. I go in and we have a conversation about what's important to them. We start to honor what's important to them, which is what an MD would be doing in this particular case. You start to honor what's important to the patient. Well, I'm not really a pill taker. Okay, honoring that, right? And once we honor that, then we say, well, what do you think would be best for you? That one question is transformative in life. What do you think would be best for you? And they know. They know every time. Teenagers know too, even at their limited level of wisdom.
Yeah.
Right? And they're going to come to you and say, well, this would be better for me. I say, great, when would you be willing to start doing that? And they'll usually say, tomorrow or tonight at dinner. They don't wait. They're not like adults in the sense that, well, I have to think about all the reasons I shouldn't do it or what could happen if I did. They just do it.
Are optimistic.
So optimistic.
Beyond what the older adult is.
Yeah.
Right? Because they're on the upswing.
Yeah.
Right? They're on this part of life
Yes.
that's always looking up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And once they get the experience of themselves transforming in a way that feels good to them and in a way that impacts their environment the way they hope that it will, we're going to have more of that.
Yeah.
They don't
It becomes
revert backwards.
self-perpetuating.
Correct.
Yeah.
And that is what I call, because I do a lot of work with these kids, I call advancing agency. So you can start advancing agency after 5 or 6 years old with a kid. The brain wave is open. It's an open brain wave. We have the brain waves, theta, delta, alpha, beta, right? We know these things are going on, right? So up until about 7 years old, you're inside the theta brain wave. You're a completely open book. And anything that goes in as a full program. There's no discretion. 7 or 8 years old, we started getting into alpha and beta brain waves. That's when the brain starts locking down different waves, and we come into discretion. And we start wondering if that's really for me, or we start testing. Well, wait a minute, I don't want to go to bed at 10. If I go to bed at 11, maybe I will like my life more, right? So we have these opportunities up until 7 years old to give very amazing programming to kids, and then to start helping them with agency after that. Like, how do you make a test for, does this work for me? Well, did you feel better? It's a simple question, right? And did you feel better for 5 minutes, or did you feel better for a whole day, or did you feel better for a week, or did you feel better for a month? And you start giving those kids some kind of feedback that they can identify, a test to use for themselves, and they become their own agent, and their own agent for making better choices. And we do this, I was on the other side of AA from a relationship where I went in as a family member, right? And I said, okay, well, what do I have to do here? Well, courage was number one, right? And number two was realizing that I could not change that person, right? So once I'm not changing anybody. Mm-hmm. I'm opening pathways for you to walk through. And when you have to do the work and walk through to the new pathway, you get the learning.
Yeah.
And then you're going to come back and tell me about the learning, right? If I'm willing to stay open and loving. And that's really important.
Yeah,
that's how we go.
That's called modern medicine.
Good.
Right there.
Yeah.
Is that opening up pathways and then just letting the patient do what they're going to do, and then coming back and doing what's next. And then testing that with precision data and using all of the tools. We're not going to take away any of the tools and all of the data that we have to find the mean, to bring this back around, because those things are really important. Your risk factors, your cardiovascular health, your obesity level, all of those things play a part. Those things are real, right? So, but those things are just tools and information that we can bring back to the patient to help them get better decision making, and then lead them down that path so that they can feel better and they can help somebody else. Yeah. Boy, pretty exciting. And the part of the F3 bar, I'm excited about all that, because I love fitness, and frankly, I just like to suffer in the gym. Yeah. Because it's very present. I don't know, how do you say it? I mean, like, I'm there. Yeah. You can't be anywhere else. Yeah. Right? And sometimes it's hard to turn the mind off. And that's a good way for me. That's what I found, that it's a good way for me to come back there. And I'm going to be that same person where you're going to say, you're going to fuse 3 levels of your back? Maybe not. Yeah. Maybe not this time. I'm going to try to find something else. So I'm excited about that.
Something that you brought up, Tim, that I thought was interesting is, and I think it relates to the altruism that we're talking about, which is coming from a place of just pure love, is as a physician being able to present the options, and whichever one you decide, I'm cool with, right? Yeah. That's not typically a human response, right? I'm going to present something, and if you do not decide to do what I'm suggesting, somehow I'm offended, right? It's like, well, then I hope you fail, or whatever, right? That's these normal, I don't know if I want to put it in the category of normal, but what has been typically a response for me in a selfish place would be to give advice thinking I'm being altruistic, but if you don't take my advice, now I'm a little bit bitter. As opposed to true altruism, I'm just contributing. And if you choose to do that, AA is like this, right? It's very, they're suggestions. We don't tell anybody to do anything. and you get to make your own decision on how you proceed. And whatever you do is like, I'm okay with.
You
I'm
have
good.
to find a way, though, to be okay with that.
Yeah.
Like, there are people and there are providers who cannot handle
Yeah.
when patients don't take their advice, and they feel really personally slighted
Yeah.
about it, or they're really invested. Like, we're really invested in our patients and we want them to have better outcomes. And so when they choose something that you're pretty confident is not going to have that better outcome, it is a thing that you have to have the skill
Yeah.
to let it go. Okay, my shift is over. I'm going to turn this off. I'm going to go home. I'm going to do the things that I want to do, and I'm going to try not to think
Yeah.
about that or not let it affect me. And that's okay, right? Like, we're all having our own experience.
And that's a real thing, because burnout in your profession, in the
it's
counseling
big.
profession, in the coaching profession is big, because we find ourselves at times incapable of letting go of that, which, as we're having this conversation, we've lost the altruistic, approach if we're not just letting it go.
Well, just
Yeah.
to bring it back to the world, like how it works really, right? And I can kind of speak to this because there's the neurosurgeon, pretty, blatant example of
Yeah.
what my life's
Sure.
going to look like with pulling the trigger. And I thought, okay, well, that's fine. That's fine for you, of course. And then I went on a journey to go try and understand the brain-body connection much greater. And, so every year or so I'd check in with him and I'd say, I want to come back in for a CT scan and see how we're doing.
Right.
He'd go, okay, Malia, come on back, right? So we'd go back in. Actually, we do an MRI, big, heavy-level MRI, right? We'd come back in. He'd go, oh, this year it's a little smaller. Oh, well, maybe something I was doing had some impact.
Yeah.
That's kind of a cool piece of feedback that we have with these scientific instruments, right? And then, intuitively, at the end of this 5-year journey, I didn't know it was going to be 5 years, but intuitively, at the end of this 5-year journey, I looked at my parents one day, and I could see the fear in their eyes for me.
Mm-hmm.
And then people around them were talking about how this person had
Yeah.
just dropped, or that person had just not gotten off the couch after a head injury, whatever it was, right? So in my realm, people were bringing up more and more of this, and I could see the fear for them. And I thought to myself, this brain surgery thing can't be that bad. I'm going to go have it. But
Almost for their sake.
yeah, almost for their sake.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then very shortly after, this friend of mine said, well, brain surgery doesn't sound like fun, and you're all about fun. And I went, oh, I have the power to transform that. So I literally transformed brain surgery into fun.
Yeah.
This is a honest, true story. I called the neurosurgeon. I said, I need to see you one more time. He goes, Malia, what could you possibly ask me
Right,
more
you
in
have
5
told me
years?
No, for 5 years.
Yeah. And I said, I just have this one more thing. Would you mind seeing me? And so I got out my rollerblades. I had on a cowgirl hat that day, and I went to, the hospital. I said, look, I just need to know from your perspective that I'm coming out this way or better, right? I'm going to have the same capacity that I have right now at the end of our brain surgery. And whether it's because the tools and the instruments got better, whether it's because he got better, whether it's because we felt more comfortable with each other in the patient and
Yeah, the
MD
provider,
relationship, right? Whatever happened, he looked at me for the first time in 5 years, and he said with total conviction, yes. And I said, okay, great, when are we having it? And he looked at me, he goes, what are you talking about?
Right.
And that was on a Sunday. And on Tuesday, I was at the hospital having brain surgery. And it was a huge snowstorm. We live here in Utah. It was a huge snowstorm here in Utah. And I just happened to be going to a concert Monday night. So I stayed with 5 minutes from the hospital because of this other concert that I had on my schedule for a long time. Why would I blow that? I'm about fun. So I go to that concert. I stay 5 minutes away. I can still make it to the hospital. Otherwise, I would have never made it from my home down to the brain surgery. I'm at the brain surgery, and this is a true story. You cannot make this stuff up. I'm sitting there with my mom and my dad, and they knew this 5-year journey. And my mom goes, oh, wonder what your anesthesiologist name is, right? So they told me, and I don't want to present anything to these people. Maybe someday we'll have them on your podcast, which would be nice. But anyways, it caused me to think about I needed to talk to that person. I needed to say something to that anesthesiologist because now I'm being responsible for my parents' experience. I'm being responsible for the provider who spent 5 years with me. I'm being responsible for my own experience, my friends, right? I'm now in brain surgery. So I meet the anesthesiologist and I say, look, you have a very unique name. The chances of you becoming an anesthesiologist would be very slim with this name that you have. So yeah, my dad was an English teacher. My grandfather was an English teacher. I said, yeah, you had to really divert to be an anesthesiologist. And when I tell you it later, it'll blow your mind a little. So I said, tell me, I have something for you. And I gave him this quote from Shakespeare. And what I had was this tangle of blood vessels that was leaking, constantly leaking. And the quote from Shakespeare was, "O time, thou must untangle this, not I. It is too hard a knot for me to untie." And I'm 28 years old. And I learned that sometime when I was 14 in an acting class, right? This monologue. So he puts me under the mask. I'm going out in the anesthesia. And he says, "That's from King Lear." And it's not from King Lear, but I'm done. I'm gone. The surgery is, 3 hours or something, maybe a little bit longer than that. And I wake up and I notice him standing next to me. And in a moment of still being responsible for this man who's not in the English teacher world, but he's an anesthesiologist, I look over and I say, first thing I say coming out of anesthesia, not King Lear, Twelfth Night. That's my whole world was about human beings and creating a better space for them. And even though I'd just come through brain surgery and I'd held onto that conscious state for 3 hours.
Even in your unconscious state.
What we think is. Right? There's so much to explore in this realm.
So true.
So I just couldn't let him go through life thinking I had the wrong quote. So it all worked out. And that's about that partnership, that agency.
Yeah.
Right? And even my neurosurgeon never wanted to see me again after that. He's like, "You're good. Don't come back." Right? Like I think I had a follow-up 1 year later. And it was done. And so I am absolutely certain that there is a pathway for allopathic medicine. There's a pathway for more natural remedies. There's a pathway for the individual in this. We just can't forget that we're human and that we're part of that system, this whole system. And how critical it is. And here I am 20 years later from all that experience, I guess, and able to, say to other people, look, don't just believe it's possible. You're looking at someone who it's possible for. So chances are it could be possible for you too, right? And I consider myself a pretty ordinary person. I drive a vehicle. I have to wear a coat when it's cold. I'm not superhuman. But I did something for myself that allowed me to progress with a lot of internal power and affirmation that I would be better on the outside coming out the other way too, right? And you had to make that decision. Courage takes something.
And it is so powerful that you provide, and there were people that provided this for me, right? Provide the example that it is possible. And even on my journey in recovery, there was a long time of part of my life where I didn't think recovery was possible.
Right.
I just didn't. I thought, these people that are having recovery, they're not like me. They don't have the addiction that I have. It's not the same. And I had been in the rooms of AA for many years and was at a particular treatment center and had been there it was a 9-month commitment. I'd been there for probably 4 to 6 weeks and engaged in these different groups and everything. And some guy in this group told a story that I actually related to. Like, I was like, wow, this guy's kind of like me. And he was in recovery. I was like, wow, not that can happen for me, but wow, maybe that could happen for me. It was the hope, right? And I think providing hope is such a powerful part of the prescription.
Absolutely.
Right? It changes. It changes everything. If you
hope comes before skills, comes before momentum.
Even what your physician told you, your surgeon told you when you asked him, you got to let me know that I'm going to be like this or better when I come out. Answer is yes. Okay.
I'm in.
Yes, I'm in. That's the hope.
Yeah.
Yep. That provides that hope.
Yeah.
that this path is going to be okay,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Or that there's something better down this path. Yeah. Yeah, that's, it's really powerful in your story too.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you have to share it. That's the other part of it,
Yeah.
right? You have to share it because you have to allow other people to hear it so that they might have hope.
Yeah. And I think that's such a huge part of it. And, you know, they talk about AA as a program of attraction rather than promotion, right? You share it without any regard for what it's going to do. Like, however anybody hears my story and takes it, that's fine. That's up to them. But it is my responsibility, because I've had this experience, to share that, right? And there's something that is healing, continues to be healing for me, for you, sharing your story, that continues the healing process, right?
Isn't that amazing that there could be a continuous healing process?
Yeah.
I mean, that's something that we often say, that you're either well or you're sick. But the truth is, you can actually get better and better and better.
Oh, you're either getting better, you're staying the same, or you're getting worse. I mean,
Right.
those are the three things that you can be, right? Because until the end, whatever that is, you're moving, right?
Yeah.
And you're either moving in one of those three directions. That's it.
Yeah. Great conversation. Appreciate you guys taking the time. Kindly MD, for people that are interested, is a publicly traded.
Publicly traded company. We're a healthcare company here in Utah.
Yeah.
You can see us. You can check us out online at kindlymd.com. And you can see one of our providers, one of our behavioral health clinicians.
Yeah.
And you can continue this conversation, on your
Personally
own,
and
personally,
individually. Yeah.
This is what we do.
And Malia, for you, you're coaching actively, but you also have a podcast. And if people wanted to get more information about the F3 bar, how do they do that?
They can go right to f3bar.com. So that would be a great place to start. The podcast that I do is about peace. I really believe that human beings, when they're doing what they love and they do more of what they love, they actually naturally enhance peace in the world.
Yeah.
So that's very important to me. And for coaching, anybody can reach out to me anytime. So
How
thank you.
How would they do that?
They can reach out to me at maliabrown.com. It's an easy way to find me. My LinkedIn profile is probably the easiest one, because otherwise I hide in plain sight.
Got it.
So my anesthesiologist's name was William Shakespeare.
What?
Oh, wow.
Yeah. You
What
cannot
the
make
heck?
this
You
up.
can't
Oh,
make that up.
that is awesome.
I mean, that's as good as Dr. Doctor.
And his
There's a
father,
couple of doctors at the U that went through residency that were brothers that were last name Doctor.
doctor
Yeah.
too.
It was like, I'm Dr. Doctor.
It's amazing.
No, you're not.
What was the
Yeah,
movie
Shakespeare's
Spies Are Us?
awesome.
Doctor?
I love
Doctor?
Yeah.
Awesome.
It's really a delight
Yeah.
to be with both of you.
Thank you.
You too.
Yeah, absolutely. That was awesome.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Daily Progress by iiNCHES Foundation, sponsored by Kindly MD. We want to thank our hosts for this episode, Tim Pickett and Alema Harrington, and special thanks to our guest, Malia Brown, for her expert thoughts and opinions. Be on the lookout for her new book, The Courageous Heart, with more details available at maliabrown.com. This episode is made possible thanks to the generous sponsorship of Kindly MD. Join Kindly MD in their mission to revolutionize healthcare. Visit kindlymd.com and click the Investors tab in the upper right-hand side of the website. And you can also visit nasdaq.com and search stock symbol KDLY for news and other information. Thank you for watching and listening. We invite you to subscribe and share your thoughts. And if you have a topic that you'd like us to tackle or someone you'd like us to interview, please send an email to progress@inches.org. That's inches spelled with 2 I's. Let's keep finding ways to get better, even if it's only by inches daily, because inches become miles after a while. See you soon.